The Bucks split a weekend set with a loss to the Lakers and then a win over the Charlotte Hornets. But Giannis and friends didn't play in the second game. Fans get fired up about players missing games, and we've got local Sacramento resident Mitchell Maurer here to run us through the challenges of only getting to see the Bucks play once live in a season. We also want to talk about Brook Lopez. His minutes are way up. He hasn't missed a game. This is a little bit of a surprise, but should we be concerned? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my stuff over at ESPN. And for the first time in a long time, Mitchell Maurer, co-editing manager of Brew Hoop. Is that what we roll with this time, Mitchell? You've got, all I know is it's a very important title, but you haven't been on this podcast for a long time, and we talk most days, but it's nice to have you back on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
All right. Well, like Mitchell, we thank everyone else as well for making Locked On Bucks their first watch or first listen of every single day, particularly on YouTube. I did another live podcast on the weekend. People seem to be into them. They get pretty fired up in the comments, and ultimately it gives me ideas for what we want to talk about on the show. And I do know there was a lot of fans that were fired up about the fact that Giannis, Drew, and Chris didn't play in this back-to-back game in Charlotte, Mitchell. We may as well just start there. Do you have any strong opinions or emotions about the idea of basically all of us going into these games and these back-to-backs and saying probably one of these games the Stars aren't going to play, and that just being the norm in 2022-23?
I would have strong feelings if they weren't resting guys on back-to-backs here in early December in the NBA season, because everything about what the Bucks are doing right now is predicated on ensuring success, or at least the opportunity for success in the postseason. You don't win games in April, May, and June by going all out in December. Not when you're a team on the level of the Bucks are. Like between Giannis and Chris, who just returned to action on Friday, and Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, among everybody else, like this team knows what they are and knows what they do. They don't necessarily, at the risk of sounding disrespectful, they don't need a Saturday night game on the second night of a back-to-back against the Charlotte Hornets, who are in a rough stretch on their own. There's nothing to be gained there. So if they can just take one to get some rest because they're not going to be able to get it later, I mean, maybe short term it's unfortunate that we don't get to see them play, but long term it's absolutely a win because it's just one fewer game for them to have to worry about, managing their minutes during and going through the whole ramp up and cool down process and everything else that puts miles on those legs that eventually will degrade progress in the postseason.
So I'm not a great person to ask here just in terms of the money that people, and we should say the large amounts of money that people spend for themselves, for their families, whatever it may be, to go watch games of basketball. So you now you used to be part of the Texas crew, but you're now living in California. So you're in an NBA city. So you'll have one opportunity, unless the Kings make it through to the NBA finals, one opportunity for the Bucks to be in town.
Hey, light the beam.
The
Kings might make it. Who knows? It's a crazy world out there.
I tell you what, if that happens, then we know that things are probably coming to an end for all of us. But this is the point. So you get Giannis and friends in town once this regular season. I'm sure you know when it is. I'm not 100% sure when it is. But as just purely a fan, and you want to see Giannis live because it's an unbelievable experience. Again, I'm not the best person to talk about it because, first of all, I'm in Australia right now. I'm not going to see any of these games. But then secondly, I'm not paying to go. So it's just, I can't, I'm not the right person to say.
Absolutely. So as a consumer, admittedly, it is let's say that as far as like the average NBA fan, I'm more informed than most, just because I follow the league relatively closely. I follow my team borderline religiously. Like I know a lot more of the ins and outs than somebody who's just looking up tickets on StubHub or SeatGeek or whatever the service is. And it's a big risk. it's a big risk as a home team that's welcoming the Bucks in to play that isn't Milwaukee, because you're not guaranteed to see Giannis Antetokounmpo, who very well may be the best player alive right now. A great friend of mine who I worked with in Austin went down to San Francisco with San Antonio. Again, I got mixed up because I moved around so much. Went down to see the Spurs host the Bucks a couple weeks ago with his son.
Oh my God, yeah.
And a couple days before, he's texting me like, "Hey, is Giannis supposed to play?" Because he expects me to know. And I say, "Probably. What do I know?" But like Mike Budenholzer doesn't let me know what his lineup plans are. If he was letting me know before he lets any of our friends in the media know, like that would be a much bigger issue, or maybe just an inside scoop for me. And so I told him probably, but I always had the caveat like there's always a chance that they don't play. And of course, Giannis didn't play that game, and that was a game the Bucks actually I think lost against the Spurs earlier in the season. And so that's a big risk. And so in March, when Milwaukee comes to Sacramento, which is, my hometown now that me and my family are living near, like when I take my son, it's entirely possible that Giannis might not play, or Chris Middleton might not play, or Drew Holiday might not play. Like all these guys that me and my kid and other Bucks fans that are in the area might want to go specifically to see them play, they might get disappointed. And there's no way around it. Like that kind of sucks for that one night where you set up everything for parking and for concessions and ticket costs and everything else that goes with it. Yeah, there's a risk you're not going to see the players you want to play actually suit up and play. That's just what the league is now. And I know that the league wanted to emphasize, they want to emphasize if you're going to rest your guys, rest them at home, where you have 40 plus games of opportunity for fans to see your guys play. Whereas when you visit another city, like don't rest your guy in that one visit to Sacramento or Portland or Memphis or Minneapolis or whatever the case might be. So it's a risk. When I was living in Texas and I was able to go to San Antonio to see the Bucks play the Spurs, like I got to see the Giannis in person. It was great. And last year, when I went to the Golden One Center to see Sacramento host the Bucks and saw Giannis play in person, it was great. My kid lost his mind. I lost my mind. It was fantastic. I can hope that the same is going to happen in March. It might not. That's a ways away. We got 3+ months to get there, so we'll see what happens. I can only hope.
Yeah, I was watching this Lakers game and I tweeted it just. Watching Giannis, and we see it every single night, but there was a few moments in that game where there was the block on LeBron or it was the Lopez block on AD that ended with the Giannis dunk, and I was like, I really just need to get back over and see him play live because it's a crazy experience. And to your point, there would be a lot of home fans that would be sitting back and saying, hey, Mitchell, that's bullshit what you're saying there, because we're the home fans. We want to see him play at home in front of the people that obviously love seeing him play. And ultimately, in a perfect world, everyone plays 82 games. But we had a couple of people in the stream comments yesterday that were saying, well, they used to play 82 games, so what's changed? I think it's pretty obvious what's changed. Clearly, there is more research. There is more knowledge of how bodies react and managing the injuries and the understanding of what an 82-game season can do to the body with athletes of this size, with the travel, with all the toll that goes through an NBA regular season. So I think it makes sense that they don't want these guys to play 82 games in the regular season. It just means that what is the NBA going to do? Because it's going to continue to be a problem. And I think that the fans should be recognized as the league is going through and doing the schedule and saying, yeah, we understand that it's all about money. But as you pointed to, we've got fans spending hundreds of dollars to see these guys play as well. And they want to see the best players and they want to see Giannis play. And as we says, and as Frank mentions, we're sickos here. So we're watching the Bucks and Hornets play with no Giannis, Drew, and Chris, and we're still having a blast. And I loved it and I enjoyed it. But the reality is that's just not the case for everyone. Those aren't the games they want to watch.
No, it's not. It's unfortunate because every individual fan who has that opinion isn't wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to see what you expect to see. It's all about expectations, right? Unfortunately, the reality is that the league operates at such a scale where they're concerned about ratings for TV agreements that they make between these different broadcasters that are worth billions of dollars in the long run that affect not just the bottom line for the league, but the bottom line for the owners, the bottom line for the Players Association, which directly translates into the level of contracts that everybody who plays in the league is able to earn. And so it's unfortunate that it's so easy to sacrifice a November game in San Antonio,
Yeah.
right? Or a February game in Detroit, or whatever the case might be. Like it's easy to talk as members of the media that cover the team to from a journalistic standpoint to look at that game as, oh, it's a throwaway game. But yeah, the people that live in those areas that want to go see those teams, absolutely, they want to go out of their way to schedule the time to spend the money and exert the effort to go see the team. And it is a massive disappointment to not get what they expect to see. There's no way around that for the league. If they want to actually make those fans happy, the only solution that they have is to reduce the number of games and or extend the amount of rest that teams get in order to incentivize actually playing your guys every game. Like right now, I think Brook Lopez is one of the few starters who's played every game for the Bucks so far. And I know the starting lineup has been in flux because Chris Middleton only just came back, a couple days ago. And so everything is a little bit different than what we would otherwise expect it to be with normal circumstances. But Brook Lopez isn't the headliner that's driving ticket sales, that's driving attendance in the arenas, that's driving TV ratings. It's Giannis. It's always Giannis. He's going to be Giannis for as long as Giannis is Giannis. And if we're not going to actually change the infrastructure the league is built on, then fans are unfortunately going to be gambling with the money that they put down to actually get tickets. And that's an unkind way of putting it, but that's kind of the way it feels. And generally, of course, it's a pretty good bet. Giannis is, on a regular season of 82 games, he's probably going to play about between 65 and 70 of them, usually. Yeah. So odds are pretty good. Bad gamble to take. But if you only get one shot, like you do in San Antonio or Sacramento or at the Los Angeles teams or whatever, it's tough. It's a tough proposition.
It is. Let us know what you feel or how you feel about this, because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening or watching that have been in that scenario where they've turned up to the game or they found out a couple of hours before that all these players aren't playing. And as we mentioned, that absolutely sucks. But you mentioned Brook Lopez. Let's get to the on-court stuff because, hey, you know what the flip side of this is? When you've got a player that is playing every single game, you have to have a conversation. Are they working too hard? Are we concerned about injury? So this is the world we live in, and we're going to talk about Brook Lopez a little bit next because he's been sensational. But we'll talk about Turo, our sponsor of the podcast today. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want whenever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia as well. Whether it's a spacious SUV you need, a minivan for a family road trip, Mitchell, or get a classic luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. It's all there at Turo. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to your door as well. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. Also, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast with Peter Bukowski. He'll be running through everything going on in the sports world. And there's one thing that you can rely on. As someone that doesn't know a whole lot about the NFL, the very definition of a casual NFL fan, Mitchell, the one thing you can take to the bank, the Packers are going to beat the Bears because they are an embarrassing franchise. And the Packers stink this year, but they were still able to handle the Bears. So I'm sure they'll be talking about that on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Mitchell.
Wait, did the Packers actually beat the Bears today?
Of course.
That's excellent. Oh, that's so good. So I remember checking Twitter earlier in the day. We had people over at the house, and so I wasn't really active on social media for most of the day. I saw that the Green Bay was down 10 points or something. And I don't really follow football anymore, so I figured, whatever. Like you said, they kind of stink this year. Yeah. So I assumed, they're going to lose to Chicago. That kind of that blows. I don't like Chicago having anything pleasant sports-wise whatsoever. So finding out that they actually won that game, that's pretty great. That's pretty funny.
Well, I hope they did. Anyway, I didn't make that up. No, I think they did. I think I saw enough happiness on the timeline, which is normally a pretty good indicator when I wake up on Monday mornings over here. I tell you who else, or I should say, I tell you who isn't struggling, and that's Brook Lopez. He is having his best season since he came to Milwaukee, which is hard to believe because he's been a star ever since he got here. Obviously, last year, very interrupted with injury with the back surgery. But here's some numbers. So as you pointed to, he's played all 22 games so far. The Bucks' number one defense in the league. He's a career high 41.7% from three-point land. His 15.3 points per game is his highest mark in Milwaukee and his highest since 2016-17. He's averaging 3 blocks per game, which is a career high. But he's also averaging 31.1 minutes per game, which is pretty comfortably above where he's been at in Milwaukee and is his highest number since 2015-16, so 7 seasons ago. So he's playing more minutes right now than he has in the last 7 seasons as a 34-year-old coming off back surgery. You flagged this one, Mitchell, so the floor is yours. How do you feel about it?
I don't know how exactly I feel about it.
That's good podcasting. That is good podcasting right there.
Oh, yeah. I am
strong takes. We're after strong takes here.
I am firmly on the fence. Can't be swayed to either direction. Just steadfast in the middle. So Brook Lopez has earned his place as one of the favorites for Defensive Player of the Year, which is, in a word, preposterous. That after missing the vast majority of the regular season last year, that he comes back at his age, at his level of experience, and is leading the league's best defense by a long shot because he is shutting down the rim as often as he is in his 31 minutes a game. But at the same time, relying on somebody who's in their mid-30s to play that many minutes at that level with that much activity. Because remember, we talked a lot about it earlier in the season. The Bucks have dialed back overall their off-ball help on defense, which means they're letting guys go at Brook more often. I know our friend Eric Name has something he refers to pretty regularly when he posts on Twitter, like, why do you try Brook Lopez at the rim? You shouldn't do that. Don't try Brook Lopez at the rim. It's going to end poorly for you. But the additional frequency of attempts going against Brook and just the higher effort level that requires to continually contest shots, because he's going to always contest shots when he's at the rim in the game. It just so happens that in the previous few years, it was like between low and mid-20s in terms of minutes per game. And now we're above 30. And he's playing in games that the big three aren't playing in, like we saw the other day against Charlotte. And right now it's fantastic. Like, he's able to block 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots per game. That's great. Dude takes 5 or 6 threes and makes 2 or 3 of them per game. That's fantastic. From your starting center, who can also get you a bucket when he posts up or off of offensive rebounds, that's fantastic. That's great. What could possibly be wrong with that? What could be wrong with that is that the additional stress that he's getting now, he ends up paying the bill on later in the year. Like in March or in April or in May, and again, I don't want this to happen. I very much hope this doesn't happen. But if he gets some sort of like a sprained ankle or a pulled calf muscle or something, that it doesn't necessarily take just a week or two to clear up. Like, does that all of a sudden create a circumstance where the Bucks defense is a lot more tenuous because they relied so much on Brook Lopez now that they didn't necessarily save the effort for when they really truly need him? Because again, like we said at the outset, the Bucks don't need to go all out to win regular season games now. We've seen it already. We saw it last year, despite the Middleton injury. We saw it the year before when they won the championship. Like, when they get into the playoffs and they just play a series against their set opponents, they have to beat that opponent, and then whoever's next, and whoever's next, and whoever's next. And if they do that, they're at the championship. If a key contributor isn't available, that job gets way, way harder. And we saw that last year with Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton wasn't available against the Celtics through no fault of his own whatsoever. He just simply wasn't available. And the Bucks couldn't get it done against Boston. Maybe they could have without Chris. I personally believe they definitely could have with Chris in the lineup, but it was what it was. If Brook Lopez is not in the lineup in those playoff series games that we need him to be in the lineup for, are the Bucks the kind of team that's able to withstand that kind of absence in the postseason? I don't know. Maybe they are, but do I want to find out? No, I would rather have Brook for the postseason.
Yeah, I don't think they can. I mean, I've been pretty strong on this, and all the teams near the top, whether it's the West or the East, I think if they lose a key player, it's going to be really difficult for them. I don't think the Bucks can win the title without Brook Lopez. I don't think they can win the title, as we saw last year, without Chris Middleton, and clearly it's a write-off if anything happened to Giannis. So this is why, and this all comes back to the conversation we had at the start of this show. There is a balancing act for this team. They understand the importance of making sure everyone, or doing what they can. Stuff's going to happen, but do what you can to manage the bodies. The one thing I would say is clearly at this point, with how conservative the Bucks medical staff has been with all the injuries they've had, including Brook Lopez last year, I think there has to be a fair level of trust that they don't feel they're not going to run Brook Lopez into the ground this early in the season. They're just not going to do that. He has been somewhat of a warrior in terms of playing games in recent years. Obviously, last year he had the back surgery, but before that, he played 81 games in 2018-19, and there was shortened season the next two, but he was in the high 60s and even reached 70 there in a 72-game season. So historically, over the last 6 or 7 years, if you take out last year, he's played the majority of games and stood up pretty well. But I would say that the Bucks medical staff at this point, I think we should feel comfortable that they're not going to run him into the ground. But I think we should also feel comfortable that on betonline.net, he is the leader for the defensive player of the year odds at this point in time. And head to betonline.net, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer to esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And NFL, as we mentioned, the Packers won today. If you I assume they would have been favorites against the Bears. I think it was in Chicago, though. But anyway, there's MVP odds as well. Everything you need. Futures, championship, and everything else you need there at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. So one interesting aspect of this Brook Lopez stuff is just the Giannis at 5 minutes. So we haven't really seen this at all so far this season. And Cleaning the Glass has him at 6% of his minutes so far at the 5 this year. It was up over 30% last year. So you can see there, the Bucks were scrambling last year with no Brook Lopez. They're trying DeMarcus Cousins. They're trying Greg Monroe. They're going through all these centers, just trying to have anyone in there. And this comes back to the point with Brook Lopez that he's not replaceable. There is this idea, and there was this ridiculous idea from a section of the fan base over the offseason that was, let's just get Brook Lopez replacement. Let's just replace him. Let's get Mo Bamba, all these guys. I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. And if you don't understand the importance of Brook Lopez to this team by this point, I don't know how to help you. But having those small ball options with Giannis at the 5 is clearly a pretty important trick to have up your sleeve. And Giannis can be effective in small doses. It's not something that is sustainable for 4 quarters. And I know there were some people calling for Giannis to play at the 5 in the game against the Lakers the other night. But sometimes if you have a player like Anthony Davis, the way he was playing the other night, he had another 55 points tonight. It probably doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If he's shooting those jump shots the way that he was, people look at it as, well, Brook Lopez can be exposed against a player like that. But I mean, to me, if he's hitting those fadeaway jump shots to turn around, so you just tip your hat and say, okay, there's not much you can do about that. And I'm not sure that Giannis at the 5 would have stopped that. But again, I think that Lopez being in the lineup has obviously changed the way the Bucks are able to use Giannis this season as well, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I think there is a physical toll with playing center for Giannis in big doses through the regular season.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned it when you were talking about Giannis at center lineups being something that the Bucks can deploy in small doses. That's absolutely the sort of strategy that should be employed for those lineups, because it's a changeup. It's specifically something that you present to the other team that they're not expecting, because the other team is expecting you to play Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, and Serge Ibaka at the nominal 5 position. Even if Giannis is out there with any of them, those 3 players are going to be doing, traditional center stuff. right? And if you put Giannis out there with, 3 wings and a point guard, and you have him be the nominal center, the only way that really creates advantages for the team is if he's out there against other people that aren't necessarily well suited for limiting him or getting in his way or stopping him. Not stopping him necessarily, because very few people can do that. Right. But relatively speaking, of course. If you do that for more than 5 or 6 minutes in a game, and by a game, I mean a game that actually matters. Like, I would even say that of the 2 games from this past weekend, that game against the Lakers matters a hell of a lot more than that game against the Hornets did. And part of that even is because, we played the Hornets we rested people going into it. It was the second night of a back-to-back. So, of course, you don't necessarily expect there to be as much, but also like the level of competition. Like the Lakers, who had struggled earlier in the year before finding their footing a little bit, like the Lakers are a better team and a more significant challenge than the Hornets are. And so playing Giannis at center against teams like that, there's not really anything to be gained from that. There's only something to be gained when the other team isn't explicitly planning for it and explicitly strategizing for how to stop it. And the postseason, teams are still going to plan for how to stop it, but they're not going to have the reps to do so, at least not early on. And of course, there's the strategy, and then there's the counter, and the counter to the counter, and all of those different chess moves that happen over the course of a playoff series. But in the regular season, like, no, there's no call for it. There's no reason to try to ask Giannis to do any more than he already is, which is a lot. By the way, Giannis does a lot for this team. Maybe don't ask him to do more. Be okay with the team not being your platonic ideal for what they could be with Brook Lopez at the helm. For whoever out there is still holding out some sort of grudge against what he's doing, which is tremendous by any sort of objective measure.
I am going to ask Giannis to play tomorrow against the Orlando Magic, or tonight, if you're listening to this podcast, depending on when you're listening to this podcast. That will be let me work out my days. That'll be a Monday night game in Orlando. And we buried the lead a little bit here, Mitchell, because as I look at the injury report right now, Brook Lopez is questionable. Why do you think he's questionable?
I mean, I couldn't tell you explicitly because, like I said, Mike Budenholzer doesn't trust me with the injury status of any of the players on the roster. Brook Lopez has played every game this year, and he's played over 30 minutes a game. Like, the guy is going to need a break at some point just to let his body recuperate. And if the team judges that they can afford to rest him against the Orlando Magic, who are still not a title contender at the present time, like, that's a good time to do it.
He's on the injury report for rest. Which at least, hey, first of all, I like the transparency. And secondly, I feel better about rest in his own bed, on his own couch in Orlando, than I do if it said back soreness. So, hey, I'm here for Brook Lopez having a rest. And you know what? I wouldn't even ask him to come to the arena. He can go hang out at Disney World. He doesn't need to come to the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing, is that if he's actually resting, he needs to not get up at 6 to get to the park when it opens and stay all the way through for the fireworks at the end of it. Like, I've done that with my family, and it takes a toll on you. You feel it in your ankles, your knees, your lower back, the whole thing. Like, I don't want Brook to be doing that. Obviously, he has access to better accommodations than I ever did. Yes. But, I mean, hey, that's just the way the world works. So, Brook's been there enough. Take it easy. Don't overexert yourself. And just play the greatest hits and then be done with it.
Marjon Beauchamp and Serge Ibaka out with that non-COVID illness. I assume they just didn't travel with the team, but they've both been ill for a little while, which is a bit concerning. Joe Ingles obviously not playing. Grayson Allen is questionable with right plantar fascia soreness. That's a new one, I believe, but we'll see there. And then Chris Middleton is probable with return to competition conditioning there, so he'll probably play, as would the probable designation would suggest. But no Giannis and no Drew, so at least it looks like they're going to play in this game against the Magic. Bol versus Giannis, can't wait. It should be a bit of fun. And like I said before, regardless of who's playing, I'll be watching, and we will have a post-game pod, Mitchell. You can guarantee that. Frank moved over the weekend, or I think he was moving today. Shout out to Frank. Hopefully, there's been minimal arguments among the family, because there's nothing worse than moving, as you would attest.
You're not wrong, and I hope that the move is going smoothly for all the Maddens.
All right, we'll be back after the game against the Magic for a post-game show. As I've been saying, make sure you jump on YouTube, because I assume at this point, if you're listening on the audio platform, you've already subscribed. But if you haven't tried YouTube, jump on, subscribe, get in the comments. Let us know what you think about the discussion we had today about the responsibility of the league and the players for fans. Do you care? Do you just simply want the Bucks to get to the postseason in the best possible shape? Let us know what you think. And this was episode 1455, which I realized yesterday was
wow,
which is episode 801 for me, since I took over about 3 or 4 seasons ago here. So we talk a lot, and we'll be back tomorrow, and that's why you need to subscribe so you can catch us all then.
There's too much to miss, and I'm telling you, as somebody who is not just I'm not producer of content necessarily, because I'm just here because Kane asked me to be here, which I'm very, very grateful for. But as a consumer of content, you really do get a different element from the YouTube portion of it than you do from the audio only version of it. Like, if you're like me and you listen to podcasts because you want to be a part of the conversation, you get so much more from being able to tell body language on YouTube, which obviously doesn't translate to an audio only platform like podcasts. It really is worth the subscribe. It truly is.
Damn. Let's leave it on that note. We'll catch you all tomorrow.